In a world where the boundary between art and nightmare no longer exists, one man dared to turn darkness into beauty, and the world couldn't look away. That man was Rob Zombie. From a lonely boy growing up beside an old Massachusetts cemetery to the creator of a horror metal empire that made Hollywood tremble, Rob's story is one of transformation, of fire, fear, and relentless imagination. He witnessed a carnival go up in flames, and from those ashes, he built his own kingdom of chaos and creativity. But his journey isn't just about music. It's about a soul forever walking against the light, finding inspiration in the very things others run from. He doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, and lives a quiet, reclusive life on a vegan farm. Yet when he steps on stage, he becomes a living nightmare. Vivid, untamed, unforgettable. Some call him insane. But maybe it's that madness, that refusal to conform, that has kept the true spirit of rock alive. This isn't merely the story of Rob Zombie. It's the odyssey of a man who turned hell into a stage and proved that sometimes, to truly be seen, you must step straight into the darkness everyone else fears. Before he became the face of horror rock, Rob Zombie was just a boy standing in the ashes of his childhood, not yet understanding why his world burned. Born in 1965 in Haverhill, Massachusetts, Rob grew up in a working-class family who made their living running a traveling carnival, a world where dazzling lights hid deceit and desperation. Every night the fair came alive with the whirling chaos of rides, the scent of popcorn, and the haunting music of the carousel. But behind that glittering facade lay arguments, scams, and the constant hustle to survive. To young Rob, childhood was like one long carnival dream, bright, surreal, and never quite real. Then that dream shattered and turned into a nightmare. It was 1977. Rob was just 12 when chaos erupted at the carnival. What began as laughter and light spiraled into horror. The tents caught fire, screams tore through the air, and terrified people ran in every direction. Rob stood frozen as he watched a man beaten with a hammer collapse before his eyes, an image so violent it burned itself into his memory. From that night on, the sound of crackling flames and the scent of smoke followed him everywhere. That trauma, that unshakable fear, would later seep into every riff, lyric, and frame he ever created. His pain had found a new shape. An obsession turned into art. After the riot, his parents abandoned the carnival life, seeking peace and stability. But to Rob, that stillness felt suffocating. The silence was louder than the screams he remembered. He withdrew into his own world, finding comfort not in people, but in the flickering glow of a television screen. For hours, he devoured horror films, Phantom of the Opera, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, A Clockwork Orange, not as mere entertainment, but as education. These films became his teachers, revealing the strange truth that fear could be beautiful when understood, that terror could be transformed into something powerful. When he wasn't watching films, Rob wandered through the ancient cemeteries of New England. The moss-covered gravestones whispered through the wind, and among them, he imagined creatures that were half human, half demon, grotesque, yet poetic. Where others saw decay, he saw beauty. Where others turned away, he leaned closer. His heroes weren't the polished or the pure. They were the outsiders. Alice Cooper, with his theatrical menace. Kiss with their fire-drenched rebellion. Bela Lugosi, cloaked in eternal darkness. Stan Lee, who built entire universes of the strange and extraordinary. And Blue Oyster Cult, whose haunting music felt like ritual. From them, Rob learned 4 languages: horror, rock, comics, and DIY punk, each one shaping his vision until they fused into something completely his own. It was a style the world would one day call the white zombie aesthetic, a fever dream of blood, noise and creativity born from the ruins of a childhood that refused to die quietly. For most, such a past might have led to fear or madness. But for Rob Zombie, it became a doorway to another realm where darkness wasn't hell, but inspiration. When that door opened, The boy who once watched the carnival burn no longer feared the fire. He had learned how to control it, how to make it dance. When childhood finally ended, Rob carried every scar, every obsession, and every fragment of his imagination straight to New York City, the one place where misfits didn't have to apologize for who they were. After graduating high school in 1983, he enrolled at Parsons School of Design, a sanctuary for rebels who saw art as rebellion and expression as survival. There, in the shadows of that creative chaos, he met Shah Yusul, a dark-haired girl with animal bones around her neck and eyes that reflected the same haunted brilliance that lived inside him. They connected instantly, two kindred spirits drawn together like moths to the same inferno. Together they became more than lovers. They were co-conspirators in creation, two souls shaping a Shah in 1985. Rob Zombie and Shah Yusul gave life to their creation, naming it after the 1932 black and white horror classic White Zombie. The band became a chaotic fusion of metal, punk, industrial noise, and macabre theater, something no one had ever heard before. Rob and Sean were the architects of every detail, designing album covers, building stage props, recording their first EP, Gods on Voodoo Moon, entirely on their own. Only 300 copies were ever made, relics that still rest in Rob's attic today, silent witnesses to a time when art meant survival. Those early years were drenched in struggle and obsession. By day, Rob and Sean worked menial jobs for an art magazine. By night, they turned junkyards into stages and scraps into spectacle. Guitarist J. Uenger delivered pizzas, sometimes at knife point in dangerous neighborhoods, while Rob scavenged metal to build lighting rigs and pyrotechnics from industrial waste. There was no money, no management, and no safety net. Only passion, grit, and defiance. When there was no stage, they built one. When they were ignored, they made noise loud enough to be heard. At first, New York's East Village didn't know what to make of them. The underground scene called them art noise, psycho rock, too weird to define. But in that strangeness, a few legendary eyes began to turn. Kurt Cobain, Iggy Pop, Thurston Moore of Sonic Youth, each recognizing that Rob Zombie wasn't copying anyone. He was inventing his own world, brick by distorted brick. In the chaos of smoke, sweat, and screeching amps, White Zombie was becoming something alive. And with life came consequences. For Rob, the nightmare he had been nurturing since childhood was finally breathing. But the cost of turning fear into art was about to reveal itself. Years of relentless grind finally cracked open in 1992, when White Zombie signed with Geffen Records. Their underground cult dream had become a tangible reality. The debut major label album, La Sexorcisto, Devil Music Vol. 1, was pure controlled insanity, a mashup of horror film samples, satanic symbolism, twisted religious imagery, and thunderous riffs. But the record nearly died before its release, packed with unlicensed sound bites. From Vincent Price's iconic laughter to Charles Manson's chilling voice, it sparked legal chaos, forcing Rob and the label to rework much of the material. When it finally dropped, sales were slow, around 75,000 copies, dismissed by critics as a niche experiment. But fate had other plans. When Thunder Kiss 65 appeared on MTV's animated series Beavis and Butthead, everything changed overnight. Within weeks, sales skyrocketed past 2 million, catapulting White Zombie from underground obscurity to the Billboard charts. But success came with irony. The media branded them the band made famous by Beavis and Butthead, reducing their art to a cartoon gimmick. At the same time, conservative America panicked. Their videos, soaked in skulls, monsters, and blasphemous imagery, were banned in several states. Church groups called them devil music. Few understood that the darkness was satire, Rob's way of mocking society's fear and moral hypocrisy. Beneath the noise, La Sexorcisto was a manifesto of freedom, an anthem for misfits who turned the forbidden into art. The record didn't just launch White Zombie. It birthed a new genre, horror groove metal. But behind the fame, the band began to fracture. The intensity that had built them now started to tear them apart. Communication died. Members recorded separately, lived separately, and drifted further with every show. From the outside, they were unstoppable. Platinum records, sold-out tours, endless applause. But inside, White Zombie had become a machine, powerful, cold, and soulless. By 1998, the inevitable happened. The band disbanded. The dream that had begun in blood and sweat ended in silence. Many thought it was over, that Rob Zombie would fade along with the band that defined him. But Rob had never believed in endings. To him, destruction was just another form of creation. Only months later, he returned, alone, with his debut solo album, Heelball Deluxe, 1998. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. From the opening roar of Dragula, listeners could tell Rob wasn't just a frontman anymore. He was the architect of his own apocalypse. The record fused industrial metal, rock, electronic distortion, and cinematic horror into a single unstoppable force. Then came Living Dead Girl, slow, seductive, and haunting, like a love song whispered by a corpse. Every track felt like a trip through a twisted carnival of the dead, where horror was no longer terrifying. It was beautiful. The album exploded, selling millions and solidifying Rob as one of the few metal icons of the MTV generation who kept his authenticity intact. His image, dreadlocks, leather, and flame-drenched theatrics, became a cultural emblem of the late 90s. In 2001, Rob followed up with The Sinister Urge, a pulse of industrial rhythm and devilish swagger. Tracks like Never Gonna Stop and Feel So Numb proved that he could make even the demonic danceable. Then came a shift. In 2006, Educated Horses showed a more introspective side. Stripped down, haunting, almost human. Fans were stunned. Could the master of monsters really be searching for meaning behind the mask? But while his music turned inward, another fire was beginning to burn. The fire of cinema. Rob Zombie was about to evolve once more, from musician to director of nightmares. Soon he wouldn't just make people hear their fears, he'd make them see them. In 2010, he returned to music with Heelball Deluxe 2, the long-awaited sequel to his iconic debut. But this time, Rob wasn't trying to prove anything. He had become a controlled kind of mad, a beast that knew how to use its claws. Songs like Sick Bubblegum and Mars Needs Women blended aggression with precision, chaos with mastery. Then came Venomous Rat Regeneration. Thunder in 2013, an album Rob described as what Frankenstein's engine might sound like. It fused industrial grit with the raw pulse of classic rock. Dead City Radio and the New Gods of Supertown stood out as a brutal anthem of media corruption. Rob mocking and celebrating America's pop insanity all at once. By 2016, with the Electric Warlock Acid Witch Satanic Orgy Celebration Dispenser, he broke every limit. The album was short, savage, and cinematic. A neon fever dream where synths, bass, and guitars collided in pure delirium. It wasn't just music anymore. It was experience. Every track sounded like a scene from a lost B-movie Rob himself could have directed. Full of demons. Androids in the Apocalypse, finally in 2021. He released the Lunar Injection Kool-Aid Eclipse Conspiracy, a reflection of maturity, madness, and mastery. It felt like the sound of a man who had not only faced his demons but learned to dance with them. Rob Zombie was no longer the boy who watched the carnival burn. He had become the ringmaster of his own inferno, a living testament to the idea that art born from darkness can illuminate the world. Rob Zombie's story begins in chaos. Born in 1965 to a family of carnival workers, his childhood was wrapped in flashing lights, freak shows, and the smell of gasoline. It was a world of wonder, until one night turned it all into horror. In 1977, when Rob was just 12, a riot broke out at the carnival. The tents burned, people screamed, and a man was beaten to death before his eyes.
But not during his
I
show!
just begged them, please.
From then
3
on,
minutes.
the smell of smoke
That's all
and the
I
sound
want.
of
I know
fire
that he
haunted
could
him.
never stop
But
for an
instead
hour.
of letting the
So
darkness consume him,
3
Rob began
minutes.
to shape it.
But as
He learned to
somebody
turn
in the
fear into
audience,
art.
I
After his
appreciate that
parents left
because
the carnival
I'm the
life
one
behind,
looking around the
Rob
guy
became
with the
withdrawn,
phone, trying to
instead
not
to the
look
shadows
through
of
his
his
phone to see
imagination.
the show.
He spent
Well,
endless
it's really
hours watching
funny
horror
because
films.
every time
Phantom
I
of
do
the Opera,
that,
the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
however
A Clockwork
great
Orange.
you think the
To
show
others, these
is,
were movies.
it
To
just
him, they were
goes,
lessons,
bam!
a way to
It
understand
jumps up
beauty inside
10
terror.
steps.
When he wasn't
because
glued to the screen,
people put them away.
he
They go,
wandered
fuck
old
it, I'm not going to
cemeteries,
drop my phone, so they go
sketching
crazy.
grotesque figures that
And they
danced in
forget,
his
oh
imagination.
yeah, this was
His
happening
heroes
live
weren't
in
perfect
front of me.
idols.
Because
They were
you
misfits.
kind of
Alice Cooper, Kiss,
disconnect
Bela
if you're
Lugosi,
staring
Stan
at
Lee,
the little shot
and the
of
Blue Oyster Cult.
them on
From
stage.
them,
Right.
Or
he
the
absorbed
new
4
thing
languages,
is turning your
rock,
back to
comics,
the stage so you
and
can
punk,
film
the
yourself
DNA of
singing
everything he'd
along
later
with the
become.
band behind
By
you.
the early 80s,
That
was ready
first
to
time I started
transform
seeing that, I was
chaos
like,
into
okay, that's
creation.
getting kind of weird.
After finishing high school,
There's no
he moved to
limit.
New
Paid
York
all that
City and
money
enrolled
to
at Parsons School of
film
Design.
yourself singing the
There,
songs.
he met
You
a
could have done that
dark-haired
at
girl
home.
named Shawn Yseult,
But
a kindred
whatever, it
spirit
is
with the
what it
same
is.
love for the strange and the unreal. Together, they formed White Zombie, a band that fused horror imagery with industrial metal. Their sound was raw, eerie, and unlike anything else. The underground scene didn't just hear them, it felt them. Over the next decade, White Zombie exploded. Tracks like Thunderkiss 65 and More Human Than Human made Rob a cult icon. His concerts weren't performances. They were rituals of noise, light, and madness. But fame came with a price. As White Zombie rose, Rob and Shawn's relationship crumbled. The fire that had fueled their art burned too fiercely to sustain love. By the late 90s, the band dissolved, leaving Rob standing alone, but also free. Free to create something entirely his own. His solo debut, Heelball Deluxe, became an instant hit. With its pounding beats, demonic visuals, and cinematic horror, it proved that Rob wasn't just a musician. He was a storyteller. Songs like Dragula and Living Dead Girl weren't just anthems. They were soundtracks to the dark carnival inside his head. Yet even music couldn't contain him. Rob turned his vision toward filmmaking, and what emerged shook Hollywood. His debut, House of 1,000 Corpses, was so shocking that Universal refused to release it. But when it finally hit theaters, it became a cult classic, hailed as the rebirth of 1970s grindhouse horror. 2 years later came The Devil's Rejects, a violent yet strangely human sequel that cemented Rob as a fearless director. Then came Halloween 2007 and Halloween 2 2009, where he reimagined Michael Myers not as a monster, but as a broken boy molded by trauma. Fans were divided, but Rob's vision was undeniable, raw, brutal, and disturbingly real. As years passed, he continued to blur the line between nightmare and art. 3 from Hell closed his infamous trilogy, transforming its murderers into tragic anti-heroes. And then came the unexpected, The Munsters, 2022, a bright retro comedy that replaced blood with laughter. It wasn't a change of heart. It was proof that even monsters can smile. Through it all, one person remained his anchor, Sherri Moon Zombie. The woman who appeared in every film he directed, not as a mere actress, but as his muse. They met when Rob was rebuilding his life, and together they found a kind of peace the world never expected from him. They married on Halloween 2002, live on a quiet Connecticut farm, and rescue animals of every kind. Despite his on-stage chaos, Rob lives with discipline. No drugs, no alcohol, no meat. He channels empathy through his art, believing that cruelty toward animals is the beginning of violence toward humans. By 2025, Rob Zombie stands as one of the few artists who have conquered both music and film without losing authenticity. His performance at the Sonic Temple Festival that year reminded the world that at 60, he still burns with the same creative fire. Each song, each film, each frame, a reflection of the boy who once watched the carnival burn. Rob Zombie's legacy isn't just about horror or metal. It's about transformation,